Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for joining the OT SolEx Partners Virtual Expo. This is our fifth expo. We really appreciate all the support, the continued support of our community. For those of us who are not familiar with the group, it's a group of like-minded OpenText solution extensions partners that have collaborated since the onset of COVID, and we collaborate to put on these virtual events and to showcase our products, our solutions. Many of these solutions are not necessarily on the OpenText price book or off the shelf. So do take some time to join some of the other sessions as well. I'll put a few links in the comments to join some of the other sessions as well. Today we have our records management showcase from Cassia. It's called the Records Disposition Approval Module, or RDA. And presenting today is our partner, Rob Burnett. He has extensive experience in OpenText records management, over 15 years. I'll say 15 because I don't want to date him. He'll be demonstrating our records management essential tool to you and the teams today. If you have any questions, if we can save them till after the presentation, if you can put them in comments or raise your hands, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to pass the ball over to Robert, and we'll get started right away. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sean. And while I do appreciate the feeling younger, it's actually over 25 years of implementing RM in Content Server and LiveLink. So unfortunately, 10 years older than what Sean led you to believe. All right, so we're going to take a look at the RDA tool. I'll do a live demo here. And obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. It's just real informal process here. We can talk about things as they come up. And yeah, so let's get with it. We'll share out my screen. Okay, so prior to taking a look at the tool, I'd just like to kind of level set of the information model that we'll be using to build our disposition search and our disposition review packages. We are going to be running a disposition search under our finance division. Our finance division is broken up into two business units, accounts payable and accounts receivable. And the structure within those are pretty much the same, where we organize it by a company, and then within the company, we have some electronic and physical documents. Now, through the folder structure, we are capturing some metadata. So for example, here at accounts payable, I have some custom categories and attributes that I've applied. I can see that I have a department, and because I'm at the accounts payable level, I have it tagged as accounts payable. And as I go down deeper into it, my company has metadata where I now capture my company name and a corporation number. And I'm inheriting my department down the folder structure, so it's accounts payable. And then I'm also capturing disposition approvers, and I'm actually doing that at the accounts payable level, so one level higher. So I say that my first approver for this information should be a group called AP RDA approvers, and my secondary level is a financial controller who will do the final sign off on this information. Okay, and so the first step before we start using the RDA product is we're going to have to run an out-of-the-box content server disposition search. I'll also prefix the rest of this demo. I work with a lot of clients, and a lot of times they rebrand content servers. So if you hear me refer to it as GC Docs, Apollo, even throwbacks to live links, I'm all referring to content server proper. All right, so let's take a look at our disposition search. So we'll head over there. We'll go to records management, dispositions, and we have a finance disposition search. And I can see that I have one already run here, and I have 266 results. So when we go in here, We're going to see the standard disposition search results that if you've ever run these within your organization, it probably feels quite familiar. We have those 266 objects. We have these two bars up top, and it's telling me that I haven't taken any action on them. Then I don't have any review decision on them. So RDA relies on the disposition search to identify your eligible records for disposition. And then once that is done, that's when you can hand it off to the RDA tool. So that's what we'll jump into now. And RDA, I'm going to walk through a very manual process of building an RDA package. And at the very end, I'm going to demonstrate how we can automate all of that manual walkthrough. So it involves literally no involvement from an end user to build these packages. And the reason I do that is because if we jump into the fully automated, you don't appreciate the magic that happens when we automate it. So this kind of shows you the step-by-step process that you can do by hand, but also automate if you so desire. All right, so RDA work packages are created in a workspace called an RDA admin workspace. And this is what it looks like. And to create a new RDA package, we are simply going to click the Add New button over on the right. Pops up, it says we're creating a new RDA approval, and we can give it a name. Now, we ran our disposition search on the finance area, which contained two business units, my accounts payable and accounts receivable. Now, accounts payable goes to one set of users, and accounts receivable goes to a different set of approvers. And so I'm going to have to create two different work packages or review packages for the records in each of those business units. And so what we'll do first is we'll do a accounts payable disposition search, or RDA package, sorry, and we'll walk through how we can actually kind of slice and dice our result set in order to accomplish that. So I'll call this one a FinAP disposition search. RDA. There we go. I'm going to choose my disposition search, which was my finance. And my snapshot, I only have one snapshot in there, so it pre-selects it for us, and we'll click on create. So what RDA is doing right here is we're ingesting the results from your disposition search. And if we remembered, we had 266. And so down here on the right, if we just scroll down a bit, we have report items equals 266. So those two numbers will match at the beginning. And we'll get to that lower half of the screen in a minute. We'll talk about what we have going on up here at the top. So we can see our disposition search and snapshot that we're building it off of. It refers to a workflow status as pending. This is not actually a content server workflow process. It is simply a review process that is currently pending. And when we initiate this and send it off for review, that status there will change to initiated. We see that we have 266 items in this report. We haven't excluded any yet, and that's our name we gave it. And we have a number of days to complete as 30. So this is the first configurable option that we have in the tool. There is some admin pages or configuration pages where you can set your default value. So this is the number of days that each approver would have to submit their review of the records. With the RDA, we also send along instructions. Oftentimes, the disposition is not always referring to a delete or a destroy. Sometimes it could be you're running a disposition to archive information, or maybe you want to run a disposition to change the status. So the instructions here allow you to send instructions with this specific work package to better inform the user of maybe what they're performing their disposition on. So in this example here, it is for destruction, and I'm providing a little bit of information. This area supports Markdown, which is basic HTML formatting without the complexity of HTML. So for example, a double asterisk around text will bold it. Here we have a single asterisk with information in a bracket. That gives me a bulleted list and a hyperlink after it. And you can see here I have a link to a corporate general delivery email. So this will be sent with the package. The next setting we have on this package is a security override. And so what security override does is going to ensure that everyone who is an active reviewer or approver of this package has at very minimum CC contents to see the records that are returned in your disposition search. Now, the reason why that's important is, let's say you have a legal department that has to be an approver in your disposition review cycle. Now, from a day-to-day business operations perspective, those legal users may not need to have full CC contents to your entire enterprise. If they did, anytime they would run searches or look for information in any other form, it'll always return a lot more information than maybe what they need by just working within their own kind of business unit folder in Content Server. So typically in an information model, security model in Content Server, those legal department users only have access to their legal department and not the entire structure of Content Server. And if that was the case, when you run a disposition search out of the box with Content Server, when they became the active approver, records in other areas would never show up because Content Server is obeying the permission model and they don't have CC contents. So by checking this box, what RDA will do is when that legal approver becomes the active approver, we will temporarily grant them CC contents to the records so that they can perform their review. When they are no longer the active approver, we'll revoke that access and they go back to not having any access to those records. So that way we can ensure that the review process isn't skipped on a large set of records. And this is the configuration option. You can turn it on to you can even hide the setting if you didn't want to, but obviously we have it set up here to show that it's available. All right, so the first thing we need to do then when we're actually filling out this RDA package is we're going to have to choose our approvers. So all you need to do there is start typing. So we can do r-fin, and it does a dynamic lookup, and we can see that we have our user groups that are in here. So this is an AP package, so I would want my AP users, and I could add individual users here if I want. Let's do an approver. So I can do approver 3s, or I can do my financial controller, and so on. And these can actually move around because the RDA review process is serial or sequential. So this first one in the list is the first approver, approver 3 is the secondary approver, and the fin controller is the third approver. So you can actually drag and drop these around into any order that you want rather than having to clear your values and re-enter them. Now, to simplify for purposes of time, we are going to do only one level of approver, but the process would be the same for all levels. And RDA supports an infinite number of levels if you want. You can have 3, 10, 30, it doesn't matter. And so that's one of the main differences with out-of-the-box disposition review processes with Content Server. You can have 2 right away without having to do much configuration, but if you have more than that, you're going to have a actual Content Server workflow built to handle more than a 2-level approver. But with RDA, it is as simple as adding in more levels in this field. So I'm just going to remove these 2 levels to make it quicker. And then we'll move down to condition or approval. So a conditional approver is if I want to add another level in certain scenarios where the information might require one additional approval step. So maybe I have some high-risk litigation cases that I want an additional level of approval. I can actually configure RDA to identify those based on classification, and when it finds it, attach an extra level of approver to it. But we won't do that. We'll just leave that blank, and we'll take a look at the next one. So auto process, exactly what it sounds like. If this is enabled, when we get the approvers back, anything that is that is approved will automatically process those items based on how your RSI schedules are built. We don't want anything deleted right now, so I'll leave that as no. Next up is our approve and reject button labels. So like I said earlier, a disposition doesn't have to always mean destruction. It could mean, like I said, archive or changing of a status. So we built RDA so that its interface can be flexible enough so that you can customize it based on what kind of disposition you're running to minimize any kind of confusion you have with your end users. Because if it said approve and reject, a user may not know that I'm approving for a deletion versus approve for an archive. So making sure that the user interface is quite clear on what they mean when they click that button can definitely help get your review cycles done and completed in a much more timely manner. So for example, the default we have here is approve for destruction. I can simply change it to approve for delete if I wanted to, and reject and extend, I could just say reject deletion to change our interface. And we'll see where that shows up when we actually send this out for our review. Okay, so I'm just going to save my changes here. And we'll take a look at the bottom half of that screen. All right, so if you recall, we have 266 items from our disposition search, and we have 266 items here in our report. However, those 266 contained both accounts payable and accounts receivable items. So I need to slice and dice this result so that I just have my accounts payable records, because that is who I am sending it to up here, my AP approvers. So I can do this on any manual process, so I can just click on an individual record and exclude, but I can leverage the metadata that I have on this information to speed that process up. So over here, I could either use my department or even identify it by my primary approver. So I see that I have my AR approvers. I have 28 records that are in there, and I want to pull those out because this is a package for my AP. So I'll click on that facet. It'll filter down to just the 28 that I have. There we go. And you notice, so it's paginated down here, but I have 25 items being displayed, but there's 28. Rather than having to go page by page excluding them, you can just select all the items across all the pages, so all 28, and then just bulk exclude them. And so those 28 objects are removed from my RDA. That leaves me with just 238 and 28 items that have been excluded. So now I know that the items that are in my RDA package is just for my accounts payable. So that's what I want, and I am going to initiate this package or start the sending out of the package for review. And so that is just done as simply as clicking on the initiate sign-off process, like that. And so over here, we had a pending RDA would have been in there, and then because I've sent it out, it shows up into your initiated RDAs, and it tells me, basic information like number of items that are in the report, how many days the report is outstanding. So obviously it's 0 because we just kicked it off. And it gives me a little insight here too about how many things are still pending. So obviously no one from AP has reviewed it. So all the items are still pending review. The AP user has not logged in and started their review process. So what we'll do is we'll log in as an AP user, and we'll take a look at what that review process looks like. So I'll log out. And I believe it's an approver 1. Do I remember that correctly? Let me double check. Yes, it is. Okay. So when the records manager has initiated that RDA work package, an email is going to be sent to the approvers. Now that approver was actually a group. And so every member of that group is going to receive an email informing them that they have been assigned an RDA package, and it's going to be linked to their personal RDA page over here, which we took a look at. And so they can also navigate to it through their personal menu under records disposition approvals. So here you can see the RDA package. When I click on it, It'll open it up, and because it has been assigned to a group of users, it'll give me a prompt saying that it's been offered to a group, and someone's going to have to accept the RDA in order to perform the review. So if you're familiar with a content server workflow, it's kind of like a member accept stage. One of the users out of the group is going to have to kind of take ownership of it. So I'll click OK, and I will accept RDA. So you can see right now I don't have much to do in this page. So it allows me to go maybe take a look at these and go, maybe I'm not comfortable acting as the approver, I will not accept. But if I am, I can click on the accept RDA. The UI will refresh and we'll see an update to some buttons that will pop up, and I have now taken ownership of it. So at the top of the page, we see our instructions. As you can see, we have our bolded text, our bulleted hyperlink, and our link to our email. It tells me when it's due, which is 30 days from now, and it tells me the number of items that I have to review. I haven't processed any, all are pending, and I don't have any feedback requests. And because I'm the first approver, I don't have a previous approver. But if I was a second or third or 30th approver, it would tell me who the previous approver was. Okay, so down at the bottom, we have 4 tabs. So initially, as the first approver, we have it set up so that all items come in as a pending state, so no review has been performed. So a user can come in here and begin their review process. Now, if you remember, I customized the labels for approving and rejecting. And so this is the first spot that you see that customization coming in. We see that I have approve for delete tabs and reject deletion tab, and then the buttons are also customized based on that text we entered. So again, if this was a disposition for an archive, approve for archive, reject archive, and approve archive and reject archive buttons. So it's very, very clear to the user when they click their button what they're approving or rejecting it for. So the process of doing that approving and rejecting is very, very simple. If the information on the screen is everything that they need to come to that conclusion, it is as simple as clicking the checkbox and clicking the approve for delete. And we'll take that item out of your pending tab and move it over to your approve for delete tab. And so you can come in here if you wanted to and go, well, you know what, I've changed my mind. I haven't submitted it yet, so I'm going to move that to pending, or I can actually send it right to rejection. So I'm going to reject it because I've changed my mind. And I get a pop-up saying, okay, you want to reject it. Why do you want to reject it? And so this is configured to force the selection here of a value, and these values of why I want to reject it is customizable. And I'm going to choose that this object here needs a legal hold, and I'll say this needs hold 1, 2, 3 applied, or 1, 2, 3, 4 applied to it, and I'll reject the deletion. And we'll move it from your approve for delete into your reject deletion tab. Okay, so let's take a look now of the pending items tab. So now you can see we're down to 237. I can also use my facets on the left-hand side to bulk delete or bulk approve items within my RDA package. So for example, if I knew that everything in Acme Corp needed that hold applied to it, I don't need to do these one by one. I can select my filter on the left. That'll filter all my Acme company information, select them all, and reject the deletion, legal hold, and I'll say hold 1, 2, 3, 4, and reject the deletion. So very, very simple to do things in bulk here. And these facets here too, I should mention, are dynamically built. So they are based off of content server facets that if you're a sysadmin or a business administrator might be familiar with, but rather than having to tell content server where they're displayed, RDA does a dynamic lookup saying if you have a facet based on that metadata and you have objects returned in your package that use that metadata, will show you the facets. So it's completely dynamic based on the result set. You don't have to spend time trying to configure your facets to work with RDA. Okay, so we showed you how we can do bulk approving and rejection and one at a time. It's very simple. Select them, click a button. And that's based on the information that you see here on the screen. But oftentimes the information that an approver may want to use to come to that determination of approving or rejecting is hidden behind in metadata on these objects. And so traditionally out of Content Server, in order to see all the metadata of those objects, you're probably going to have to say, click on your records detail tab to get all your records detail information. If you want to see what's in the description tab, you come over here to the general. If it was a physical items, you click on specific. In your categories, because I have 3 categories, I would have to come to my categories tab, click on each category tab itself to see my metadata. And then that point, I would need to come back and say, okay, you know what, I'm comfortable with that object. I can choose it and say approve for delete. So very, very click intensive. And that's how you would have to do it out of the box with Content Server. But with RDA, we have a more information icon. And so with the more information icon, when it's clicked, we are going to open up a main window. And we're going to summarize and pull in a lot of the information from some of the tabs here. So we obviously see the name of the object, but we also tell you who the owner and owner group is, as well as the full path to the object, because the full path of the object often gives very good business context to the information, not just by the name. We're going to show some of the RM classification information and the description field. But what about our categories, right? So we can click on the categories link down here and it opens up to a new window over there. And so now we have flattened the categories. Rather than having to go to each category tab to look at the metadata, it's a complete flat view. And in one page, I can see all 3 categories and the attributes found within it. Now, if it was a physical object, there may be some metadata on that. So I click on specific and that will open up on its own window. And because we're looking at an electronic document, there's nothing really important to see there. So I'll just position that window off a little bit. And for records detail, we'll move that window over there. So now we have 4 windows that essentially summarizes much of the metadata that a user could potentially want to look at in order to come to a determination of whether they need to approve or reject these items. So now that I have all this information in front of me, I'm going to go ahead and approve these items for deletion. Now, so what we'll take a look at when this happens is we notice that we're doing a Visio document for Stark Industries. And so all 4 windows are referring to the same document. And so when we approve for delete, we're going to mark that one for a deletion. And you notice how all the windows dynamically update with the next item available for me to review. So again, I don't need to restart that clicking around. I have it all presented in front of me. I can digest the information, come to my conclusion, click my approve, and it just automatically goes to the next one. And now we can see that we hit a physical item. I now have a little bit more data over here in my physical object tab, my specific tab. Again, I can approve for delete, and off it goes, sends me the new one. So this makes it really, really easy for an end user to just power through all of the information that they're being requested to review without having to go through that tedious process of clicking around all that information. And in the background, while they're doing that, we see that it has been dynamically updating, and those objects that I was approving were getting moved to the approve for delete tab. And we can do that for the reject and feedback that we'll get into in a minute. So a very, very handy tool that really speeds up that review process. Now, what if there was some information as the approver that I wasn't really too sure I was comfortable approving for delete? I wanted to get some feedback from some team members. So I could come in here and grab, let's say, my Cyberdyne documents, and because I'm like, I'm not sure if there's a legal hold for these guys. I'm going to request feedback, and I'm going to assign that to a specific individual. We'll call that approver 02. Click OK. And so those objects are going to be moved out of my pending tab and over here to my feedback request tab. And click over on my feedback request tab, and I can see that I have them out pending, and I'm like, you know what? I've changed my mind. I need more people to approve it, to give me some feedback. So let's go ahead and add another approver here. And we'll go ahead and do approver 4. We'll add them to the list. So now I'm asking 2 people for their feedback. And so these users will get an email, just as the original approver did, letting them know that they've been assigned an RDA package for feedback, and it'll take them to their RDA workspace where they'll have a link, and their interface will be almost identical for them as you see here. So we won't spend the time of logging in and logging out as those users, but basically they'll have the same interface with the exception of having the ability to assign a feedback, because we're not going to keep letting them pass the buck down the chain. They can either provide their feedback or not. And so if I expand this table row, I can see that I've requested some feedback from both approver 2 and approver 4. Their recommendation has not been received yet. And that's what it is. When approver 2 logs in and says approve for delete, they're just providing a recommendation. If you remember, I took ownership of this RDA package. So really the final decision at this step lies with me. So when it comes back, I will see whether these approvers recommended for it to be approved or rejected. And I still need to make a decision, because potentially they could have conflicting opinions. One may say approve, one may say reject, or maybe they could be rejecting it for invalid reasons, right? So if it is a destruction and it's past its legal retention, keeping it around just because you want to use the document as a template might not be a good idea. You can copy the format and create a new document, but to keep this potentially damaging information around longer than what it needs to isn't a good reason. So I can overrule based on the reasons that they provide. So that's what I'll do now. Is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bulk reject these items. And I'm going to say, you know what, these are also needing to be on legal hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll reject. And so these items get moved from your feedback request tab into your rejection tab. Okay, so now we have 219 that are left. So just to speed things up, what I'm going to do is we're just going to go ahead and bulk approve the rest of these items. So we'll just select the all button, select all 219 items, and I'll click approve for delete. So all my items have been reviewed, 223 have been approved, 15 rejected. It's asking me, do you want to submit these? So I could click no, because maybe I want to come back tomorrow and have one last look at it, but we'll go ahead and mark it as complete. It'll take it off my plate, and if there was multiple levels approvers, it would send it on to the next individual or group. It's not, so it goes back to the records manager. So I'll go ahead and I'll log in as them to take a look at it. We'll go ahead and log in as our admin. And we'll head to our RDA workspace. In our initiated RDA tab, there's our RDA package, and now we can see a status of it as being ready for processing. And so what do we mean by ready for processing? Well, if not all the documents were approved for, let's say in this case, disposition, there may be some actions that we need to take for it. And in fact, that's how we set up this demo, right? We rejected 15 items that need to have a legal hold applied to them. So now that this is ready for processing, the records manager clicks on it. The interface has changed a little bit. It tells me who the approver was, when they completed it. There's whether they were a conditional approver or not. It includes the instructions to help me as a records manager remind myself why I sent this disposition out. And we have an extra tab down here called unreviewed items. Now, again, there's a bunch of configuration settings associated with the tool. And so what could potentially happen based on your configuration setting is a package could go through all of the approvers, and some of the items might not be reviewed when it gets completed. And that's because we have some settings that says after the time allotted for the user, which was 30 days here, it forwards on to the next user. But there's another setting that says, what do you want to do with anything that's unreviewed? Do you want to force approve it or leave it unreviewed? So if that setting's turned on with the advancing auto advancing after 30 days, in theory, it could come back to the records manager with items that never went through a visual review by the user. And so that's why we have that extra tab here. It is blank, and so that means everything was reviewed by the approver. So let's take a look at our 15 objects that were deleted, or sorry, that had a reject applied to them. So here they are. They're all shown. They're telling me or showing me here that the user rejected it, and the reason they chose was a legal hold, and the extension comment was hold 1234. Now, the last approver should be shown here. If I wanted to see the approval states in a multiple level of approver, I would expand the row and I could see each approver listed here and what their decision was. And it is the final user who has the final say on it. So because we only have one, we don't need to expand these rows. Now, one of the neat thing with RDA is you can actually take action on your records directly from the RDA tool. You don't need to collect these objects or put them into an accession in order to perform bulk actions on these. So because these are requesting for legal hold, I could select them, click the drop down and say apply legal hold. And so that would just open up the standard interface for applying legal holds, and we would choose the legal hold that we want. Just have to click the go button. There we go. And now I can search my holds and apply the holds. Now, again, because this doesn't need to be always about a deletion, we can do tons of things on bulk actions here. We can update records management metadata, and that includes things like maybe updating a status or changing an RSI on it or marking things as essential. We could close the window. We could change physical item metadata. Again, maybe there's a location change on the physical items that need to occur. We could remove holds. So in other words, you could use an RDA to approve items coming off of a hold. We can even move these items. So in the case of a wrong classification, often that means it's in the wrong folder in Content Server. So maybe I need to bulk move these objects to another location. And we can do that again right from this interface. No additional steps are going to be required. And that last one's their override approval state. So sometimes users will submit an RDA package, and after the fact, they'll come back and go, whoops, you know what? I accidentally said reject the deletion of those items when, in fact, I forgot that that legal hold doesn't apply to them. And so rather than having to go through that whole review process again, they can send an email to the records manager. The records manager comes in here and just overrides the approval state, which would take them out of reject and move them into approve. And by the way, all of this is audited. It's audited to the fact that who the approvers were, what their approval state was. It'll audit the feedback users and what their recommendation was. If I, as records manager, is overriding, we'll audit that as well. So everything is fully audited for a very defensible records management disposition program. All right, so what about our approved items? So again, doesn't have to be about deletion. So in theory, we could be doing items here as well, updating records management data and approving, changing metadata and moving things around or changing the approval state. But because this is an example of about a disposition for deletion, let's take a look at how that would be accomplished. So there's nothing that I need to do on this page. They are approved for delete. I just need to kick off that deletion process. So as a records manager, I can jump to my snapshot that was run to gather up these records. And so I can just jump to it by the link up top. And it takes us to the out-of-the-box disposition search snapshot with one small change. You notice the bars up top are missing. So we've hidden those because that was about review states. And so reviews are now being handled by RDA. So now we've put in a box showing you the RDA packages that are built using this snapshot. And so we had one, and it tells me that it's ready for processing, and there's a checkbox here. So as a records manager, all I would need to do is come in here, click that checkbox, and RDA will synchronize your review states from RDA and incorporate them into the out-of-the-box review decision for your disposition search. And so here you can see the items that have been rejected and approved. And the items that are pending is because we haven't gotten any review for them. That was pulled out because it was the accounts receivable records. So at this point, we've put them in. Anything that has been approved is pre-checked for you. And all you need to do is click on the perform actions, and it will do whatever the action is you have built and incorporated into your RSI, which in this case is rdestroy. And it does not allow a user to override this selection. So because the review decision came in as rejected, I'm not allowed to click that checkbox. That would potentially make it destroyed. And so it says that they're disabled because it's being managed by RDA. So it's very safe in this area now because we know RDA is controlling that review. So that's the end-to-end process of manually building an RDA package and sending it out for review and doing the review, coming back, working through your package as a records manager to either apply holds or moving items, updating metadata, and then also coming in here, synchronizing your reviews so that you can perform your disposition action from core content server. Now, before we move on to the magic, a couple of really quick things we'll take a look at. So I'm going to jump back over to my RDA workspace. And if you remember, right, we sliced and diced our disposition search, and we were just building one for accounts payable. Well, I want to build in an accounts receivable one. So if I do accounts receivable, I'm going to choose the same disposition search, the same snapshot, and click create. And so RDA is going out, again, pulling in your result set. But if you notice down at the bottom now, our report items only contain 28. It didn't contain the 266 originally, and it excludes 238. So 238 is actually what we sent out for review in our accounts receivable. And the reason we do that is because we know that those items were sent out for review, and we do not want to have any conflicting reviews coming in. So it says, hey, you can't include it in another report. It is already in an active RDA. So we are excluding it, and you are not allowed to include it. So the second time around, it would be very simple for me to build this package and send it out for accounts receivable. The other really neat thing too with RDA is we have an ability to filter your disposition search for new items only. So oftentimes disposition searches take a really long time for an organization to walk through, either because there's such a large number of records or users are just a little bit slow in getting them in. And so a lot of times they only run them once a year, because they know there's a lot of lead time before they get their reviews back. And another thing that the reason why they do that is because when a disposition search is performed, it will constantly return items that have not been yet actually deleted from the system. So when I run this disposition search, I would get 266 items again. And so even if a new item came in here, let me go back, and I'm going to add a new item into one of my results. Go in here. I'm going to add a physical item. So now that there's one physical item in here, if I were to rerun my search using RDA, go back to our records management, dispositions, and start our search. Only one item comes back, not 266. So out of the box, you would get another 266, and you wouldn't know which ones are already out for review. But RDA is smart enough to go, you know what? Those first 266 are already out there for review, so don't return them in another disposition search. So you can build new work packages just on the new items that have come up for disposition. And that allows you to schedule your dispositions a lot sooner. So maybe like on a monthly basis, because you're only going to pick up all new items that are available for destruction each month, as opposed to maybe once a year. So that is a very handy feature. Okay, so we're quickly running out of time. We're going to show how we can incorporate the magic in here and then open it up for questions. So I'm going to go back to my dispositions and go to my RDA, and I'm going to clear out that area. Where's my RDA? And so as a records manager, I have the ability to recall these. If I've sent it out in error and I need to add or remove items to it, I can do that without having to rebuild everything. So I'm going to send it back. An email would be sent to any outstanding approvers, letting them know I'm taking it back. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these two. And then I'll pop over to my dispositions, and I'm going to go to a new tab that comes with the RDA called RDA Disposition Review. So this is a custom tab that comes with RDA. I'm going to say auto-generate my RDA work package. It's going to be called Finance RDA Package. Auto-initiate it. I'm going to turn it on yes. I'm going to turn on that security override setting to yes as well. But this is where the magic is happening. So if you remember, we had metadata on my objects that told me who the approvers should be, right? There was a primary approver attribute and a secondary approver attribute. So I'm going to use that metadata to tell RDA to create a unique package based on that information. So only the information that belongs to that unique union of information, primary and secondary approver, gets built and sent out for them to review. Conditional approvers will leave alone, and auto processing, again, I don't want anything auto deleted. So I'm just going to save my change, and I'm going to come back over here and start my search. So I'm going to open up and look at my snapshots. So now you can see I get the full 267. So that's the original 266 plus the 1. And I'm getting the full amount because I don't have any RDA packages built. But because I had auto generate and auto initiate turned on, when I come over here to my RDA workspace, you can see that I already have 2 built and already 2 initiated. We have packages 1 and 2. There's my 238 and 239, and I can see that my approvers are AP and AR. So it split those packages up perfectly based on that metadata, and were sent out for review. So with that automation, in combination with scheduling your disposition searches, you can actually fully automate the building of these work packages and sending them out for review. And if you even took it as far as wanting to auto process these items, anything with that setting turned on, anything that came back as approved would automatically get deleted. So a records manager wouldn't even need to touch these objects as they went through a review cycle from beginning to the end. And you could just have these running constantly every month. And so we do have one customer that has tens of thousands of employees, but only one records manager. And so, in fact, this tool was built with them in mind so that they could fully automate their disposition review cycle, because the records manager simply does not have the cycles to go through and take action on all these items manually. And like I said, there's tons of other settings and nuances of the tool, but we just don't have the time to get into them. So I'll stop it there, and we'll open up the floor to questions.
Thank you, Rob. Does anyone have any questions? They can either raise their hand, or if you want, you can put your questions in chat. Perfect. Emily, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Rob. That was really, really interesting. I was just wondering, and apologies if I missed this, if the reviewers have submitted all their feedback, and then it's come back to, say, records management is involved, it's not just all going through an automated process. If it came back to us and we didn't agree with something, like they were extending, what is the process for that?
Yep. So what we'll do, so there is when it comes back from into a ready for processing state, the records manager has the ability to override that state. And so a little box will pop up and they'll say reason for being overridden. So again, if they rejected it, saying I want to keep this because I like it as a template, the records manager can go, no, that's not a valid reason. We are going to destroy it, and type that into the little box. We'll keep that as an audit event, and it gets moved over to the approved. And you can do that either way, approved to delete, and to rejection, or rejection to the approved.
Okay, thank you. And if it was going through the automated process where, like, the records manager maybe doesn't have the time, they don't need to be involved, could the reviewers, theoretically, could they just keep extending? Or would there be some sort of alert or something coming up about that?
Yeah, in theory, let's say, you had a retention period of 1 year, and so it goes every year. In theory, if it's completely automated, the user could reject it every year without the records manager knowing. You could build, so there is a reporting mechanism that's easily incorporated into this process. So it supports an integration with web reports. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yes, yes.
But you could, in theory, write a web report that audits the audit table from RDA and looking for items that consistently get rejected on a yearly basis or whatever it would be, and then provide a summary report on that. That's without doing any sort of customization in the tool. One thing, because we love building this tool, the entire tool set was built out of our customers' requirements, and having worked with RM for 25 years, I have a lot of experience working with the customers on how they perform their RM. We're always looking for new ideas to incorporate into the tool. So, if that's something that you says is a must, we'd be happy to work with you to incorporate that into the tool itself, and then it becomes a supported feature of the product.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Is there any other questions for Rob? Okay, well, the video will be available for everyone as well if you wanted to go back and review the video. Next up is Raven Black at 12 o'clock if you wanted to join that session. And Cassia also has a session again at 3 o'clock. I put some information in the chat there if you wanted to join either the 1 o'clock Raven Black presentation, or you wanted to join us again at 3 o'clock. We'll be demonstrating two other solutions we have, one called Prism, which is a privileges and security solution. And we also have a content quota manager for those who want to manage things like personal workspace. So again, thank you very much for joining the SolEx Expo again this year. And again, thank you very much for your continued support. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.